welcome to my channel. This is Tracy here, and I'm happy to see ya. So today I thought I'd show you how to get a single color gradient with distress ink. So I'm going to be using accent opaque paper in white. I'm going to be using prize ribbon distress ink. I'm going to be using black soot distress ink. I'm going to be using some pigment, different white pigment inks. So I've got multiple brands and types that I use, just depending, and you'll see my white pigment ink is a mess. I've got this blending brush reserved for white, and then I've got this flat, large round blending brush, which I love, and I'll list that in the description box below. It's from Amazon. I will be buying more. And then I've got this Rowney Aquafine Chinese White. And it's a watercolor ink. It's still kind of a pigment ink. You just can't get a pure white ink. It's impossible, I think. So I wish, because sometimes I prefer not to work with pigments, especially if I'm stamping. So I'm going to use this Ranger pad or page, whatever you want to call it, because I'm going to be blending some inks onto it. But first I want to cover the whole thing in the prize ribbon blue ink. And so I'm going to take that big flat blender brush, and I'm going to just start blending. And I want it very heavy on the top, and I'll go from heavy to light just by amounts of ink that I put on. So I'm putting on quite a lot of ink towards the top of the page, and then I do circular motions to fill in, and then back and forth to kind of get my straight gradient. And I just keep blending, and then I'll add more ink where there's already a good amount of ink, so that I'm not getting a bunch of blobs. That's my name for them, blobs. And this is a nice juicy ink pad. And then I'm going to just get a little bit more ink on, and then start pushing it out towards the top of the page. And just, I don't need it to be perfect, because what we've got going here is what's going to resemble some snow drifts, because this is going to be a snowy night. But I don't have a moon or anything in there. If you want a moon, by all means, add a moon. Mask it off, whatever. But I want it to I want to emphasize on a single star representing the North Star. And so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little slippery mat there, and I'm going to lay some color on it. So I'm going to lay the distress ink in the black soot. Let me just move this over so you can see it a little bit better. And then get that on there pretty good. And then I'm going to bring in the prize ribbon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my blending brush that I use for inks, and I'm going to get the globberies off of there, and I'm going to blend these two colors right there on that mat. So most of us know that if you add a little bit of black to a color, it's going to make a darker shade of the color, and that's exactly what I'm after. I'm after a really, really deep, deep blue. And that's exactly what I'm getting by adding them together like that. And you can just add the black right on top, but I found doing it this way really kind of keeps that true color. And so already you can see we've got a gradient going here, and I just go about a third of the way down, and I need just a little bit more black because I want it a little bit darker at the very, very top. So I'll blend those together and just blend across, and then with a lighter touch blend out. So I go heavy, and then I loosen my grip on the brush. And so there you see you've got already a good gradient going here. The part that has the lighter color, it's fine, because the bottom is going to represent a snowdrift. And I will be using the pigment ink, the white pigment ink, for that. And so you'll see when I open my pad, that pad is beat up and it's almost empty, so that's why I don't care if it looks blue or whatever. But I do have a blending foam that I'm using, and I will just take and get that as wet as I possibly can and just kind of swipe across the bottom there to lighten up that color. I'll go just a little bit more than a third of the way up. And I'm sorry, I'm partially off camera here, but you'll see that, you know, and I do flip my paper when I need to. You'll see that I've got it much lighter, and then I'll take my brush and clean off some of that darker color and grab some more prize ribbon and blend that back down. There we go. Let's get it a little bit more in focus there. And just doing, you know, I don't need necessarily a straight line, but it, you know, definitely if you go in with more of the prize ribbon, then you will get a darker, even darker shade of that gradient. But I'm just kind of pulling it all up towards the top, a little in towards the bottom. And now you see we've got our gradient. So I'm going to just put my inks away and kind of wipe up my mess here. And then I do want to make sure that this is nice and dry before I take on the next step. But I want to show you a trick here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that Dollar Rowney watercolor ink, and we're going to splatter, but this splatter is a little bit different. It makes the tiniest splatter, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Sometimes I don't want big chunks. I want little. So I'm just going to dip my brush in there. And I'm just going to take my finger and run it across, and it's going to lay down the tiniest little galaxy of snow or whatever. And I want to get a lot in towards the bottom. You get really inky doing it this way, but yeah, that's what wipes are for. But I just love that it just does a really light smattering, and it does dry down a bit as well. And I've got a little spot there where I got my finger, so I'm just going to kind of throw in a little bit of that white to kind of cover that up, and then I'll just smooth it out with my fingers. That's right there. I'm going to have a snowdrift anyway, so I'm good with that. But I'm just going to continue to lay down these little spots to represent the snow or stars or whatever, you know, wherever your heart takes you. And so now I'm wipe up my mess again, wipe off my finger. It takes a bit of time for that pigment ink to dry. I do help it along though with my heat tool, because yeah, I mean, we can't be here all day. But I really did love the effect that gave with the small, really fine, soft brush compared to like using a fan brush or something like that. I'm going to set my ink really well, because in the next step I'll be embossing, and so I want to make sure, and I do end up getting embossing powder where I don't want it anyway, but it's a good thing it's white and it looks like snow. So I just get this nice and dry and try not to warp my paper. So you can still kind of see some of those white spots, and I want to make sure all that white pigment is dry. And I'm just going to kind of pick up my mess here a little bit while I get my stamp out that I'm going to choose. And this one I'm choosing from Fairy Hugs. He's a little reindeer, and I'll put him in the description box below. I will be using my stamping platform, and I have a piece of Sizzix sticky grid paper underneath here. I found out that this was working pretty good for me, so I'm keeping it that way. And I am going to grab my fine white detail embossing powder, my Versamark ink, and my embossing buddy, and make sure that paper is nice and dry and doesn't pick up more of the embossing powder than I want. I'm going to choose a placement for my deer here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll coat him in the Versamark ink. And I like to do it at least twice just to make sure that I've got full coverage, because I don't like little holy things in my embossing. So I'm just going to press that down and then lift it back up and add more embossing ink, and then I'll do a little bit more pressure on that with my my little pressure tool that I made. Give that a good press. Grab this tool because I don't want it too hard. I just want good coverage. I don't want to lose any detail in those beautiful antlers. And so I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up. And there we go. It's good. I like it. I'll go ahead and get my white embossing powder, and meanwhile heat up my embossing heat gun. I'm just going to pour the powder on the deer. I want it to seem like he's just popping right up out of the snow. And you see, I don't even notice the white specks up there because my brain thinks it's the embossing buddy, but it's actually embossing powder. So I do, when I emboss this with the heat, I move my gun around a lot, or my heat tool, simply because I really don't want this to warp. My prototype kind of was too warpy. I wasn't happy about that. So I just take my time and, you know, just move that gun around, move that tool around so that it doesn't warp my paper. I want to make sure, and I'll turn it side to side, make sure everything I see is shiny to make sure it's fully embossed on there. And just about, do a little bit more from the back, a little bit more from the front. And you can't hardly tell, but on top of his antlers is where I got embossing powder everywhere. But that's all right. I'm happy with it. We're good. Sorry about the sniffling. I keep stopping my recording to sneeze. I lose my place, so I'm just going to clean off my stamp here and put away my stamping platform because I'm done with the stamping portions. And there's my little deer. I just want to make sure that he's nice and cool and dry, and then I'll just take a brush and brush off any excess embossing powder. Yeah, right there's where you can see that I got a little bit too much. That's okay. It still is okay because it's snow in the background. So I'm going to take my Prismacolor white pencil and I'm going to make my North Star, and I'm just going to start by just making a small white, fairly light circle. Rub it kind of around so there's no pencil, I don't know, pencil debris. And then I'm going to go to war with my number 5 Jelly Roll pen. I do not know what it is with these things, but I just bought a brand new one and it doesn't want to work right. I'm not sure what happens, other than I know they don't like to draw over pigment ink very well. But if I get my number 10 out, it's more than happy to blob everything all over the place. And my number 8, it's a half and half. But this number 5, it's always a war. I'm going to try and find a piece of paper that has some color to it so I can see if there's actually ink coming out. And I see there's ink coming out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw lines just straight through like a, I don't know, like a cross. Yeah, and more wars with my pen. If anybody knows any tricks, and I'm going to do one on each on the diagonal as well. Anybody knows any tricks to how to make these pens work, I'm happy to hear it, because I want the thinnest line. I don't want anything gigantic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a jewel right in the center of that, and a pretty good size one. I'm going to use the rhinestone ones instead of the crystal ones, so there's not a big difference except for the rhinestone ones are silver backed. Just choose my placement. Yep, I'm going to be happy with that right there. And by the way, I'm looking for a stamp, you know, a sentiment that says wise men still seek him. If anybody knows where to find something like that, please leave a comment below, because that's almost my favorite Christmas sentiment. So I have, you know, some ephemera that's like that, but it's not, you know, it's not my choice of colors. It's, you know, came with a paper pack. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Glossy Accents, and of course I glob too much, because y'all know me and my Glossy Accents wars. I'm going to just take my wax pencil, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that little rhinestone right down on top of that star. So even the animals know to follow the star. And all it's left to do is kind of just wait for that Glossy Accents to dry, and then work on getting my snowbanks. So I have this, I have these Lavinia acetate masks. Love them, they're great. Best investment ever. I make them, tons of them all the time, but I just really like the thickness of these, and the variety, because you get 4 in a pack. So I'm going to take my dirty pigment ink again, and I'm going to make my first layer of hills. I'm just going to tap it on. I just want it a little bit lighter than what's there already, but not, you know, not perfectly light. And of course that moves on me, but you know, that's what happens when you're crafting. Stuff just doesn't always go perfectly. So I'm happy with that, and what I'll be doing here is making kind of another hill, but I'm going to use my clean, my Hero Hues, my cleaner white pigment ink, so it'll be whiter than the hill behind it, giving it a little bit of sense of depth. I'm just going to kind of blend that one in and down into it a little bit, because I wasn't happy with how the color was looking. So there we've got the main portion done here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this down to a little bit under 4 and a little bit under 5 1/4, because I want to do a matting layer. I just have to decide where I want to cut off. And then I have a piece of scrap that I cut something out of that I'm going to use for the matting layer, because why not use it, right? So I'm going to cut that to just a tiny bit over 4 to a tiny bit over 5 1/4. And I'm going to get my tape, and I'm actually going to tape my little deer onto there. Now I'm just going to do the 4 sides. Obviously there's nothing in the middle for me to do. Again, it is just a matting layer, and you'll never even notice that that was an empty piece of scrap paper. Yeah, I save all of that stuff. I save all of my scraps. It's really bad. You know, so I will do where you kind of dog ear these the sides here, so I can kind of work on placement, and because that stuff is really sticky, and it'll just stick, and you won't be able to get it off if you miss. So doing this way gives you a little bit of wiggle room to get your tape down. And sometimes your dog ears fall or don't pull off properly, so you have to make sure they're sticking out. And it moved on me, so that's okay. I'm okay with that. And that one didn't quite pull out. I'm going to get the rest of them pulled out. And there I have it, stuck to the sparkly holographic paper. And I think later I might put some actual glitter in the snow, but for now I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to actually glue this part down because I can, and I feel like it'll be a little bit more secure, and a little bit of a battle with my glue as well. I don't know about you guys, but I watch people's videos and everything just goes so smoothly, and I'm like, how does that work? Because it doesn't work that way for me. But I'm gonna get my glue down, and I'm gluing that down to a top folding white card base, and that's also the accent opaque white. I use it for just about everything. So, but I am gonna put a sentiment on here. And I haven't used this kit yet, so I'm going to battle here with getting it open. And there's I'm just going to use the Noel, because I don't want a lot on there. The main focal point is the deer. And I'm going to grab a piece of silver. I'm going to grab a piece of silver holographic cardstock here and just cut that little Noel piece out of there. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out in my, I'm not going to get out my sidekick. I'm just going to cut it out in my Vagabond 2. And it's tiny, so just take a minute. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use my makeshift pokey tool, because I lost my pokey tool somewhere in this room. And I'm going to pull that sentiment out. It's a tiny one, so you have to be careful with it because it's kind of delicate. And just carefully pull it out of there. It doesn't want to come out. There it goes. So yeah, I'm going to like that right around there. So rather than using liquid adhesive on this, I'm actually going to pick it up with my tweezers because it's hard to pick up when it's that small. I'm going to use my permanent tape runner and just kind of carefully rub those tape dots on there. Make sure I get it all over. And it wants to stick to my fingers, of course, but that's okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it in my tweezers and kind of place it where I want it. Let's cover up that little bit of, no, I wasn't crazy about the hills part. And there we go. There's the little card with the little gradient for you. And I wanted to show you some other ones that I did with inks, these gradients. That was grape, what's it called? Something grape. Mermaid Lagoon. This one is the, oh gosh, I don't remember the colors I used. Anyways, I just wanted to show you some examples, and this is with ink. You've already seen my quickie doing this with oxides. So anyways, thanks for stopping in and, crafting with me. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you want to be notified when I upload new videos, go ahead and hit that bell. Have a great day.